Hi everyone. We're ready now to shade our Baroque portrait. You should have had it all gridded out and drawn on there. There are adjustments. Once I was done with the grid, I'm looking and there are a few things not lined up. But while you're shading, you can make adjustments. Be sure to always have your reference photo right next to you so you can see it. All right? So we're going to start with focusing in on the eye, and I want to show you how to shade an eye. So I've got my reference. An eye has a pupil in the center, and that is always black. It's actually a hole inside your eye that opens and closes to let in light, and that's how you can see. Then the colored part of the eye is actually muscles that pull back on the eye. So there's a couple of little dents close up, and I'll show you how I shade that. And then the strongest muscles are on the outside. That's why we've got this dark line. Also, your eye casts a shadow onto your eyeball. And then those eyelashes kind of grow out that way. So while we're shading, I'll be talking about that. I'm going to put her eye on this side so we can see it. So the first thing I like to do, this is just a regular number 2 pencil. You can tell it says number 2 on it, which is soft enough to get dark darks. I always like to start with the outline, and then I start to shade inward. I have the black of the pupil, and then there's a highlight right here on the eye, because your eye is always shining. It has tear ducts that keep your eye tearing to keep it from sticking to your eyelid. Then you can see the cast shadow from the eyelid. And now I've got the darks. Now I kind of shade lightly. I'm barely pushing on my pencil. And I draw those lines towards the center. I'm representing those muscles. Then I want to build up the eyelashes. And she looks a little mad in my drawing, so I'm going to try and soften up some of those lines. I see a lot of dark shadows, very dramatic. Her teardrops or tear ducts. And this is sort of not as dark. And then she's got wrinkles under her eyes. Her eyelid is dark. And her eyelid is a little curvier than I first drew it. Here's her eyebrow coming down. And I'm barely pushing with my pencil. And I'm going to draw out the hair. I'm really spending half my time looking at my picture and half my time looking at what I'm drawing. I erase out whatever I don't need. And then sometimes you can actually roll a piece of paper, or if you have a blending stump, I like to roll up a piece of paper to shade with. You can actually buy a rolled up piece of paper. They're called a blending stump or a tortillon. And I use that to blend the places I can't fit my finger in. So I shade some of those details in there. And that feels better. So let's go back and see that from a distance. There you go. So her eye looks pretty shiny. Now I've drawn a line for the shading on the side of her face. So I just kind of want to see what that looks like. I often will shade in 2 different directions to fill up the lines. I don't want to see a lot of lines. I want to see the value of the face. Always looking at my reference, I see that this was a little wide. Now that I've filled that in, there's a curve and a shadow at her cheek. As I get the dark, so that's as black as you can get your pencil to go inside there. And all this area is pretty dark. I see a lot of white. My paper has a lot of texture to it. So I need to really push with my pencil to get it extra dark. But I always do it slowly, because once you get it too dark, it's hard to erase. Drawing a portrait, once you have it drawn, that shading really shouldn't take too long. So I fill in those areas that seem too textured, too white. And she really is starting to look rounded. Sometimes I'll use my finger instead of the paper if it's a big area to smooth it out. And then you can use your eraser to get some of the highlights. I love using my eraser. Her hair has a little on her eyebrows are a little lighter than that. I really see this eye highlighted right there. There's a really strong highlight here. More shadow underneath. And then this whole area, remember those Harry Potter glasses we learned out in the proportions of the face? This is where I can really see that eye socket causing shadows. And then she's got a little bit of eyelashes here. I might tweak it, but I'm going to show that later. Let's go back. Let's go down to the nose now. So the nose is actually created with a circle in the middle and those two side circles. I'm aware of them, so now I really look for them. In the nostril, that circle casts a shadow into the nostril and it actually comes down on the lip. There's a little bit of shading showing the roundness of this nostril, but then not a whole lot more than that. This side of the face has all the light. This is the part, the nose has the highlight on, like that sphere you guys all drew. And then this is the general light and the shadow as that curves around the ball of your nose and then comes up into your eyebrow. And then I don't shade all the way to the edge. That's the reflective light. The light is bouncing off the top lip and going onto the back side. Then it's casting a shadow inside the nostril. So that's where the darkest is. And there's another cast shadow on this side of the nostril. Look at that reflective glow. It might be too bright. I might just put a one value over it so it's not obvious. And then her nose is casting a shadow on her lip. She doesn't have a mustache. That is not what I'm drawing. I'm drawing that shadow coming down her lip. Curves on to the top of the lip. And then this part of the upper lip has a little bit of shadow as well. So it doesn't take much to draw a nose. The noses usually don't have any lines. It's more value. So this whole side of her nose is dark and it comes up into the eye socket. And I'll come back to that in a minute. All right, so we've got the shading on the nose. I'm going to blend it up a little bit. And now we're going to go down to the lips. So remember the lips was a valley right underneath the curve of the nose. One mountain and another mountain. The cast shadow is usually on the upper lip. I see a little bit of light where her lip comes out, but the rest of it's pretty dark. So by gridding this portrait, I was able to get all the drawn details, and now it's just a matter of coming in with shading. The bottom lip, I mentioned doing like 2 teardrops. I see them in there. There's actually shadows there. This side is much darker because the light's coming from the left. And then I use my darkest value inside the crack of the mouth. Give her a little hint of a smile. This is hardly any light at all. It now comes underneath the lip and across the chin. So this whole side of her mouth and into the chin is all shaded. All right, let's zoom out and see how she looks so far. There she is. She looks a little happier than I first sketched her. All right, So you've seen how to shade the mouth, the nose, and the eye. And now I'm just gonna go ahead and shade and we'll make this a time lapse. So you don't have to watch the whole thing. So I'm gonna go really I'm starting to get some of the values in there. This side is the dark side, so I go pretty dark. I want to show you some tricks on doing hair. So she has big clusters of hair. Each hair would be a lot of work to shade. So I'm going to show you a technique. So instead of my rolled up piece of paper, I got a paper towel. I think that works better. Or a Kleenex. So I'm building up a layer of dark value, filling in that whole area. Then I'm going to blend it with my paper towel. So I kind of just got a pinch of the paper towel. I'm going to shade it in. So that blended it nicely. Now look at those highlights in her hair. I'm going to use my eraser. Look at that. So just where I have that hair, it's in clusters. It's doing the drawing for me. And just hitting the highlights of her hair. Even into her face, I see these wispy hairs coming down. Kind of did these already in the shadow side. Then I'm going to come in with my pencil as dark as I can in some of the dark areas. So underneath this cluster of highlights, down here, deep inside is pretty dark. This whole section of hair has some dark separating it. And underneath the scarf. So it looked really complicated, but with just a little bit of shading, some erasing into it, I was able to do her hair pretty quickly up there. So it really looks like she's got hair. Now, one of the things I like to do is start to get some of the background dark too, because I want to see where her highlights and shadows are on her face. And her face seems so dark, but when you compare it to that background, that same way of shading in two different directions, and I'm just going to do a little bit here. I build up a layer. I don't color too hard or push too hard with the pencil. I'm going to go in one direction. And I see the stripe here. I don't want that. So I'm going to go in the opposite direction. And I'm building up a layer of graphite from the pencil. And once I've got it in two different directions, maybe even three, then I can use my napkin to blend it. I don't want to rub too hard, just enough to blend it. And you can see how I really shaded that area. It's even darker than that, but at least I've got most of it kind of smoothed out. And I just continue going around her hat. All right, there we go. And I hope you have lots of fun shading your Baroque portrait.